This YouTube story on part 2 further expose London Borough of Ealing, the council, and its employees inadvertently failed to update the service user subject access data requests since June the 28th, 2022, breach Article 16 of the GDPR 2018 and Section 165 under the Data Protection Act 2018, which is to be unacceptable. On August the 8th, 2022, Kerry Stevens committed bribery with corruption using the council unreasonable behaviour policy. This includes fraud, bribery, racketeering, abuse, and corruption to cover up the vexatious complainant policy, failing to update subject access requests, SARS, covering up the corruption of council staff members contrary to the Bribery Act 2010, infringed Article 16 of the GDPR 2018 and Section 165 under the Data Protection Act 2018. Kerry Stevens used the illegal restrictions with corruption, infringed the survey user subject access request on Article 16 of the GDPR and Section 165 under the Data Protection Act 2018, which the London Borough of Ealing Legal Department committed corruption for processing inaccurate information of the service user social care needs of Article 16 of the GDPR and Section 165 under the Data Protection Act 2018. Kerry Stevens committed abuse, bribery, and corruption in relation to the service user housing disrepair claim. A serious allegation against him. He was involved trying to shut down the housing disrepair case, which is contrary under the Fraud Act 2006 and the Bribery Act 2010. Kerry Stevens committed abuse, bribery, and corruption to the service user social care needs, housing needs, subject access requests, or related grievance. For the avoidance of doubt, Kerry Stevens, the single point of contact at London Borough of Ealing, breached Article 16 of the GDPR 2018 and Section 165 under the Data Protection Act 2018. Kerry Stevens committed bribery and corruption in relation to the service user social care needs and housing disrepair claim as a single point of contact contrary to the Bribery Act 2010. Kerry Stevens wrote to the service user by bribing him with this restriction, infringed Article 16 of the GDPR and Section 165 under the Data Protection Act, inadvertently failed to investigate the unregulated practices against London Borough of Ealing and its council staff by covering up the corruption under the Bribery Act 2010. London Borough of Ealing further encouraged the corruption in their request to bribe the service user to utilise Mr. Stevens as a single point of contact contrary to the Bribery Act. London Borough of Ealing Legal Department made no serious effort to update the subject access data requests since July the 28th, 2022, if reference to the 130 email being sent by the service user inadvertently failed to address their unregulated practice, breach Article 16 of the GDPR 2018 and Section 165 under the Data Protection Act 2018. Kerry Stevens never considered the council equality duty towards the service user. Instead, maintained continued disability discrimination, breached the Equality Act 2010. Mr. Stevens considered the restriction as unnecessary, unreasonable measure without providing documentary evidence as an infringement on the service user subject access data rights on Article 16 of the GDPR 2018 and Section 165 under the Data Protection Act 2018. The allegation against Kerry Stevens contained in the document are very serious indeed by exposing the council for committing bribery. These include data protection corruption. The council staff members operated being unregulated in the employment, did not follow the subject access data requests, and failure to update the procedure, had breached Article 16 of the GDPR 2018 and Section 165 of the Data Protection Act 2018 by acting unprofessional, unlawful, further abused their position with unreasonable behaviour, committed corruption under the Bribery Act. Kerry Stevens inadvertently failed to comply with the request on the subject above, failed to immediately desist from making inaccurate information and defaming claim about the service user, because the service user will consider bringing criminal proceeding to prosecute Mr. Stevens for harassment contrary to the Protection from Harassment Act 1997 and the Bribery Act 2010 in reference to bribery. The maximum sentence for conviction for harassment and bribery is 10.6 years, a fine, or both. If Mr. Stevens is convicted by the court for both offences, the service user will be seeking a restraining order by banning Mr. Stevens not to contact him. In this regard,